where we're at right now, what we do is dependent on where we're at, right? If you wanna win a game, you strategize dependent on where you're at. And I'm here to announce to you that where we're at right now in the nation is it's not enough to pray. It's not enough to vote. We're now at the point where we actually have to strategically volunteer if we want to take our nation back in reference to the key issues that are at hand for the future of our children and the future of our freedom. The reality is that we are now at a point, and I don't mean to lay a heavy, but I think authenticity and honesty is really important. Otherwise, we find ourselves cooked and we don't know what happened. But we're actually at the point where gatherings like this and announcements like what I'm about to share this morning, we are literally inches away from the type of thing that I'm doing this morning being criminal. Okay? That's how far this is going. And that might sound alarmist, but I'm going to share a couple things that is going to prove to you unequivocally that it is actually not alarmist. For some of you, the reason that you're in this room this morning is because you fled, or your parents fled, like my parents fled. My parents fled Eastern Europe right before the Second World War. They came here for the sake of freedom. They came here for the sake of having economic opportunity, right? And we are now literally inches away from decisions being passed that are pre-socialist, pre-totalitarian type behaviors that many of us or our forefathers actually fled to this nation to avoid. But the beautiful thing is that, I keep hearing this phrase in my spirit, and that's that we are more powerful than we know, and together we're stronger, and we're more powerful than we know. I keep hearing that over and over and over. And so this morning, I want to start by celebrating the good news, okay? So the good news is that as of this moment, we are now at October 27th. Okay, we're 6 days past the election. As of this moment, we have more pro-life, pro-family, pro-freedom elected members of parliament going back to the House of Commons than we did this time last week. Okay? So the good news is this, and I want to start with the good news. The good news is that we've taken ground, okay? The good news is that we have a better scenario if we're talking about government, righteousness, and justice. Government is a gate. Whether we believe it or not doesn't matter. It's kind of like gravity. Whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter. It still is. Oxygen, whether you think you need it or not, doesn't matter. You still do. There's a reality that who rules in our nation in natural government. This is one of the reasons why the Bible spends so much time talking to kings and about kings, right? And even Jesus himself was brought before kings. Paul, this is why Jesus said, when, not if, but when you stand before kings, I will fill your mouth. And this was in a non-democratic context. Every single one of us has an opportunity every day to stand before a little K king in terms of our earthly government. So government matters, and we know that because it's all over the Bible. I don't have time this morning to unpack the theology of this. But the good news is that we are taking ground in terms of the federal context. The bad news is that we have not yet hit our tipping point. But there's also good news in that, and that's because we still can. We still can. Together we're stronger and we're more powerful than we know. And we are radically, grossly underperforming as the body of Christ right now and having amazing results even for that underperformance, okay? So this is where I'm at right now, okay? The dead need to get alive. That's salvation. How do you change a nation? Sometimes people will say, well, you just get more people saved. It's evangelism. The answer is yes. Usually that comes from the evangelist. And then once you get the dead alive, you get the alive awake, right? That's discipleship. That's teaching. That's pastoring. That's actually talking about the issues of righteousness and justice. It's not enough just to be alive, but the alive now then have to be awake and discipled. Okay, but it's not enough just to be alive and just to be awake, not in our current context in Canada if we care about our freedoms. In our current context, we need to get the dead alive, that's evangelism. We need to get the alive awake, which is pastoring and teaching. And then we need to follow the prophetic voices, the strategic voices, and the apostolic strategies that are actually intellectually based, that have the spirit of wisdom on them, that are the genuine strategy of the Lord for the time. We're not talking about some sort of brute force where we just do crazy, frenetic activity. We are at a point where we need to actually be focused and strategic so we can actually win. Show me one single battle in the Old Testament that didn't have a strategy embedded in it, that didn't have a seeking of the Lord and a prophetic unction, and then the people actually did it. I would like to suggest that there are two categories of people right now in Canada that need courage. The first are leaders. People like me, people like Craig, people like Charlie that need to get up and have enough love for our nation to say it like it is and say it with a spirit of hope and a spirit of grace, and then to actually give courageous, wisdom, intelligence-based direction. But the second group of people that need courage are those that follow. As a matter of fact, if I look at the story of Moses when they were coming out of Egypt, I would like to suggest that it actually took the Israelites more courage to follow than it took Moses to lead, because Moses had the word of the Lord in his ear, right? And the Israelites just had to trust that this nutcake was hearing from God. You know what I mean? So I am here to present to you a nutcake. Let's go. Okay, so I want to celebrate the progress. But I also want to talk real quick, and I'm just going to hit this fast. If you want the expanded version, it was actually streamed on Facebook, and so you can kind of get, and even the expanded version is still the condensed version. But some of the things that are at stake, that were at stake on Monday in the federal election, but that are still at stake even to this moment. Obviously, I'm going to say the obvious here, our natural resources, the stewardship of it, the prosperity of our nation. I stand here as a girl that was born in Alberta. Most of my family is from Alberta. And it's hard for me to say this with the full gravity of what I feel, because I feel rushed. I want to honor Charlie because he's got a real word as a prophet to Canada this morning. And but I want to say this, the nation, the rest of the nation voted the way they did, not because it was a vote against Alberta, or because it was a vote against oil. I'm here to let you know that they authentically do not know. The rest of the nation authentically doesn't know. And you might sit here and say, well, how is that even possible? It's possible because of something called regional media. In Alberta, the oil, the resources, the international influence on our elections, it's all over the news feeds, it's all over the talk shows. I want to say, as somebody who lives and breathes nation stuff and issue stuff, I have not heard one story that authentically describes what is happening to Albertans other than my own show. All I've heard in our news media, both regionally and nationally, is the complaining out of Alberta. I haven't heard the stories about how there's people in Drayton Valley that are wiping their butts with face cloths because they can't afford toilet paper. I had not heard the stories until I went to try to find them of the people that are walking off bridges in Fort McMurray. The rest of the nation authentically does not know the suffering of Alberta right now. They just honestly don't know. This is a prayer point. If I was in Alberta, I would be mobilizing a massive campaign to flood CBC and CTV and say, you need to begin to tell the story of Alberta, because it's a story for the nation, not just for Alberta, because as Alberta goes, so goes the nation. And so I'm here to apologize for the ignorance. When the Ontario voted, when the Atlantic provinces voted, they voted out of a place genuinely of ignorance. They do not know. It's like that, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. But I feel like the enemy is trying to divide us, and the enemy is trying to pit region against region, and we can't let that happen. We have to start to think as a nation, and I'm not doing very good at being concise right now, but I want to say this. I recognize here that Alberta's battle is Canada's battle. And I'm standing here this morning committing to you. I've got this national talk show now. We air 13 times a week. I am committing to you as a congregation, as a province, I'm going to try to figure out a way to tell this story every possible way that I can without making people shut me off because it's all I'm talking about, you know what I mean? But maybe it's all I need to talk about for a while, I don't know. But just to say that, we know that that's one of the things that's at stake, your future, your economic prosperity. Another one of the things that's at stake, this is a major thing that's at stake, and I already alluded to it, and that's our freedom. It was Randy Boissonnault, a Liberal member of Parliament, who I believe lost on Monday. A Global News out of Edmonton actually reported in August that Minister David Lametti, who's probably going to be the Justice Minister again, he was the Justice Minister after Jody Wilson-Raybould got ousted, and he is an LGBTQ2 activist. That is his MO. It's one of the reasons why Justin Trudeau put him in. And he has said that he is going to make it a priority to criminalize something called conversion therapy, and that he is going to use an important tool, which is the revocation of charitable status for churches and ministries that don't line up to the state definition of sexuality and state ideology. So it's going to be similar probably to the summer jobs attestation, where churches and ministries are going to have to check off a box saying that they line up with the state's view of sexuality or they lose charitable status. That in my opinion could be one of the best things that happen. Losing I know churches like this are going to thrive because you guys get it. You don't give because of what you get. You give because of love and because of principle. We might get delivered if we start losing charitable status as a nation and get our voice back and get our courage back. I don't know. I don't think it has to come to this, but it might have to come to this. Okay? The thing about this that actually alarmed and alarms me even more than the charitable status thing is the criminalization of biblical mindset. So if you're gonna say the conversation in a church isn't okay, then you're also gonna say the conversation between a mom and a child isn't okay, and the conversation between a pastor or the conversation between a friend and a friend. We are now getting to the point where the state is going to criminalize conversation that does not line up with state ideology on moral issues. Does this sound like Canada to you? Well, this is not alarmism. This is not some sort of fringe media. This is global news. Reported this before the election. And I did everything I could. I talked about it in 3 or 4 of my shows. I sent out an email to pastors all across Canada just to say, just thought you might want to know that this is one of the things that's at stake. I don't think the issue of charitable status is the big issue. I think the issue is the criminalization of biblical thought. Because if you're going to criminalize the thought, does that mean that you're going to criminalize the book? Where's this going? I don't know, but I think these are really intelligent questions to at least answer and to pose to ourselves, are we okay? Are we okay to just let this happen? Are we okay to let our children be raised in a nation where some of the books that you're holding in your hand, the Bible, might not even be legal in our nation within 10 years because of some of these things, or maybe 2. Who knows where this is going? Are we going to have a Canadian version of the Bible? Is that where this is going? We don't know. But we do know that the Justice Minister has said that this is a priority, not just an idea. Okay? This is what we're talking about. What's at stake? We're now at a point, can you hit, I think it's slide number 13. If you think I'm being an alarmist, this is a news story that is actually current news in British Columbia, where there is a father in British Columbia that's being told that if he refers to his child by their biological gender, he will be charged with something called family violence, which is a brand new legal term they made up for this. Okay, this is how real it is. It's already going through the provincial court systems. Okay, are you feeling good? Okay, let's talk about the federal debt real quick. I'm not doing good. I'm sorry, you guys. Just cut the mic when federal debt. I want to just share this real quick. Did you know, slide number 15, did you know, sorry, I know that they're having some issues with the software today, but that's okay. We'll figure this out. So the federal debt right now, we are pushing $700 billion in the federal debt. In the last federal election, there was only one party that was saying that they had any intention of balancing the books, and it wasn't going to be until the fourth year. The party that got elected, the Liberal Party, said that they are going to push $72 billion into our deficit within the first year. And now let's be clear who benefits off the debt. It isn't those who benefit from the social programs primarily. It's the fiscal elite and it's the banks who own the stocks and bonds. Because right now, just on the federal debt, we pay $80 million a day to interest on the federal debt. What could we do to help the oil industry in Alberta with $80 million a day? What could we do to help reserves that don't have clean water with $80 million a day? What could we do to war vets that our prime minister looked eyeball to eyeball and said, we don't have money for your health care with $80 million a day? And we now have a government where some of the most fiscally elite individuals have their hands on the national coffer, and every time the debt gets driven up, they bless their buddies. We need to start talking about this stuff. This is potentially a greater injustice to the next generation than the environmental injustice. Because right now we're paying 35 to 55% of our annual income to taxes and government fees. The average family in this room paying $40,000 a year just to taxes. My parents paid less than 20% of their annual income. I'm paying up to 55%. What in the world are my children going to pay? We're setting our babies up to be slaves. Is this okay? It's not okay. I'm going to get happy in a second, okay? Abortion. We live in a context where our federal government, slide 18, in May of this year, 5 days after 3,000 people flooded the Expo Center in Edmonton to watch a movie called Unplanned, lined up outside the Expo Center for a full hour, looked like pictures from an old-time revival meeting, to get into a pro-life meeting. A week later, less than a week later, about a week later, our parliament gives a standing ovation to celebrate a woman's right to have access without medical cause to third trimester abortion. A fully formed baby being medically dismembered at taxpayer expense when that surgery is more dangerous than giving birth. You know, I have an idea. Why don't we cleanse the land of the unjust bloodshed, and maybe God will start pouring out a blessing that will deal with our debt. You know what? We serve a God that can breathe into this carpet and put a diamond mine. If we start to get the right things right, we need to have trust that our nation will be blessed. And so it's one thing to be alive in the Spirit and releasing the shout of the Lord. That's awesome. It's another thing to be awake to some of the issues that I'm talking about. And again, I could fill the next couple hours. I won't. But it's a more powerful thing to be unified and moving in an intelligent way that can actually move the ball forward. Cindy Jacobs called me in the middle of the election. The Lord gave her a word of knowledge and said, call Faytene right now. This was Monday night. And she said this to me, a few things. She said, you need to rally the leaders as quickly as you can within a 2-week window after the election to debrief. Number 2, you have no permission to take a vacation. I was like, thanks, Cindy. That's awesome. And number 3, she said this, you're getting smarter every time. Keep going. I'm going to show you something real quick here as I begin to close this in, okay? So we're celebrating the progress. Go down to slide 32. This was the kingmaker. What is this? This is the swing ridings in our nation that determined the outcome of the federal election, okay? You are not in a swing riding. So as awesome as voting is, and as amazing as it is, and as important as it is, and we all need to do it, it's actually not the thing that would have shifted the election. Because in all honesty, this riding was probably going to go blue even if this church didn't vote, just because everybody's so heated right now in Alberta, okay? What was the thing that we could do to actually change the outcome of the election other than pray and decree in the Spirit? But we serve a king, Jesus himself, who did both. He started in the place of prayer and then he went up and went to the cross, right? If he would have stopped at the place of the spirit realm only, we'd all be going to hell. He actually had to go to a physical cross and have some blood on his hands, get some skin in the game. It's the same with us, with everything. If the poor were in front of us, would we just sit here and declare? If there was a bunch of hungry people, would we just sit here and declare? If there was a bunch of unsaved people, would we just sit here and declare? No, we would break things open in the spirit realm. We would have intercession, but it would be a mentally insane person that would just sit here and declare over hungry people. No, you'd go to Safeway and you'd buy them some food, right? You'd put some skin in the game, right? It's always the both and. It's the prayer and the action, the prayer and the action. Oh, God, help me get faster here. So what did we need to shift the last federal election? Okay, there were 50 swing ridings where there was a pro-life winnable candidate. And why do I focus on the life issue? I've had over 1,500 sit-down meetings with members of parliament. Several of them have met with us several times. That's why we've had so many meetings. And I want to tell you this, that the life issue is a litmus test issue. If somebody's pro-life, they're going to be pro-religious freedom. They're going to be probably pro-balance the books. They're going to be pro-Israel. 90% of the time, somebody who has the courage to be pro-life is going to be on the same page with us in probably just about every other issue. They're going to be pro-immigration with compassion. They're gonna be good. I'm not saying that everybody's going to agree on everything all the time, but the life issue really is a litmus test issue. And so in these ridings, 33, go to slide 33, this is what we needed to shift the 50 ridings where there was a winnable pro-life candidate. We needed about 980 volunteers nationwide, specifically going to the target swing ridings. Okay, to give this a biblical construct, in the Israel's time in the Old Testament, they didn't have 338 constituencies, they had 12. Right? They had 12 constituencies, each given to one of the tribes, right? Judah, Manasseh, go down the list. How did the Lord instruct them? The ones that had the safe ridings were called to settle their babies and then cross the river and go fight for the ones that didn't have safe ridings, right? Cross over the Jordan, go west, and help your brothers establish their land. We need to start thinking intelligently as a nation and start actually getting on planes and getting in buses. And just like we have a mission trip to the Dominion Republic or to Mexico, have a mission trip to the GTA, have a mission trip to Atlantic Canada, and say, we're going to go and bless and help some of our brothers who are on the other side of the Jordan, who are standing for life, who are standing for freedom, who are standing for economic prudence, and help these guys and girls win. Because when they win, we all win. We got to start thinking like a nation. If we just hunker down and think my fort and no more, we will lose. But if we think as Team Canada, we will win. Because when we show up, we win. So we needed 980. We were trumpeting this. I talked about this for probably 3 months on my show. It was out there. We were talking about it on social media. We were having national networking meetings with senior leaders. This was not something we kept to ourselves. We shared it in whatever way that we could with whatever ears would hear. Okay, so 980. We got 650 people who mobilized into strategic ridings, towards that goal of 980. So praise God, that's 71%. That's a B. That's not bad. That's not a fail. Okay, so that's the good news, that we actually made it almost 2/3 to what we needed, that we thought we needed to shift it. The bad news is this. Hit the next one. Have you ever gotten 3% on an exam before? Whoo, burn. I just got 3% on an exam. Because we project, and this is lowballing it, this is really lowballing it, that we probably got this message about the swing riding strategy to about 20,000 people. Nationwide, at least. There's probably a lot more than that, but let's just lowball it for the sake of being conservative. So 650 people responded out of 20,000. And we wonder why we lose. 3% actually got some skin in the game with intelligence. Prayerful intelligence. But you want to know what? Every 650 of those people, they went into those campaign offices and they had love on, and they had honor on, and they had hope on, and they had a servant's heart, and they blessed. And I don't know how many people got saved because those people showed up in moments that mattered and were like a glass of water on a desert parched land with people that were pouring out their lives for the sake of a nation. This is one of the greatest evangelism opportunities, to show up in campaigns when people are in the fight of their life. Whoo! You better believe, if those guys get elected, they'll be your best friend forever. Okay? So 3%. But the good news is this, and I'm really bringing it home now. Slide number 37, with 3% response rate. I've never gotten 3% on an exam in my entire life until this past election. But with only 3% response rate, 13 out of 50 of those swing ridings shifted, and the pro-life candidate got elected. So if only 3% could shift almost a third of those 50 swing ridings, what could 5% have done? What could 10% have done? Together, we're stronger, and we're more powerful than we know. The answer to our nation's issues. Maybe the Lord is allowing us to be pressed. Maybe he's going to allow us to be persecuted, to lose some privileges, just so that we will get out the salt out of the shaker and start going to places that we otherwise never would have showed up to. And guess what? People are going to get saved because we're that awesome. That was supposed to be a joke. You guys are like, okay. So if we would have met our goal of 980 volunteers, slide number 38, we would have shifted another 12 ridings because that's how close the margins were. We had 2 swing ridings that lost by 300 votes in the GTA. That's statistically 1 volunteer. 300 votes. 1 volunteer could have shifted those. That was in the GTA. How many of us have ever gotten on an airplane to go to a conference? I did on Friday. You know what I mean? We need to start thinking, the things that we do for the Lord in other ways we can do for our nation in this way. We would have shifted another 12 swing ridings. If none of the swing ridings with pro-life candidates in the lead would have had a vote split with the PPC or the CHP, because there were 3 pro-life candidates that lost because of a vote split, which I don't have time to unpack right now, we would have had another 3 pro-life candidates elected. So go to slide 41. That means, to bring this home, if we would have reached our goal of 980 volunteers in the strategic swing ridings, which is only 5% of 20,000 people hearing this message, if we would have voted strategically and not split the vote in some key ridings where there was a Christian pro-life candidate running for one of the lead parties, then we would have shifted 30 out of 50 of the swing ridings with pro-life candidate wins. But you know what? Those pro-life candidates are also pro-oil. So you can swap that out. Pro-oil candidates. Slide number 42 shows where the projection actually landed. At the end of the day, on Monday, this is where it all landed. The red team and the yellow team, who are not pro-oil, who are not pro-life, who are not pro-Israel, who are not pro-Bible, who are not pro-family, took the majority, which is over the green line. If we would have shifted those 30 other ridings, slide number 43, it would have taken them under the green line, and we would have had a moral majority on some of these issues. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. If we just would have performed at 5% on the test. Are you getting encouraged with how powerful we actually are? It's not that the stuff that we've done so far wasn't amazing and awesome and powerful. It's just that we're getting smarter every time. And if the dead get alive and the alive get awake and the awake start moving intelligently, it's not very long until we can start entering into slide number 44. We're celebrating the progress today that with 3% activation, we shifted 13 ridings. But we want to push towards the potential. And we want to start thinking like a nation. I promise you, we actually mobilized people into swing ridings in Alberta because you had one up in Edmonton, and we won that riding because people mobilized into it. There were a couple swing ridings in Saskatchewan that we mobilized some of those 650 people in. So I'm not saying everybody's got to go to Toronto, because some of us came to the prairies, which is some of the reason why the prairies went the way it did. But if we start thinking like a nation, and we start rising up and saying, I want to go to the place where nobody else is going. I want to go to the place where there's the greatest need. You know what we're going to start to do? Hit the next slide. We're going to start to do what these guys did. These are the founding fathers of our nation. The reason Canada is great is because in former generation, people of faith who love God got skin in the game. The founding fathers of our nations were not pastors. They were not evangelists. They were not preachers. They didn't have TV shows. They were politicians. They were business people. They were newspaper owners that said, for the sake of future generations, for the sake of my freedom and the freedom of my children, I'm going to step up. I am not discouraged this morning. I am focused. I'm a little bit ferocious, but I'm not angry. There's a difference between ferocious and angry. Trust me. You know, I'm focused and I'm encouraged because we have been swinging so far below our potential, which means that I'm looking at the tipping point right here in this room. Together, we're stronger. And so I don't know about you, I'm chomping at the bit for the next election. I'm just like, come on, bring it on, because I'm going for 4%. I want to get 4% on my next exam, because if I get 4%, we just might be able to shift a nation.